Good morning.
It is 10 a.m. We're going to call this meeting to order. It's good to finally see everyone again. Let's see here. I also want to make sure everyone mutes their microphones. Please only turn them on when speaking. And also remember to announce your name when speaking. So my name is Chris Jeter. I forgot to do that earlier, so I apologize. So move on to the next agenda item. We're going to do start off with our roll call and certification of our quorum with Mr. Alex Ortiz.
Okay, thank you, sir. I will also add a reminder for all board members to please keep your video on through the duration of the meeting so we can make sure and keep a quorum. All right, so roll call. Gary Stanford.
Present.
Okay. Antonio Pena.
Here.
Marion Armstrong.
Here.
Victor Ochoa.
Good morning.
Morning. Blake Howard.
Hello.
Bruce Okrulik.
Present.
Brad Gam.
Here.
Sherry Gaither. Luis Acuna.
Here.
Laura Cuvion. And presiding officer Chris Jeter.
Present.
Okay, sir, we have a quorum.
Excellent. All right, move on to our next agenda item. It's open government training. Be presented by Laura Pfefferly, our Assistant General Counsel, discussing the Open Meetings Act, Administrative Procedure Act, and our Public Information Act.
Good morning. I'm Laura Pefferly from the Office of General Counsel, and I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can follow along on the PDF that we use for this presentation. Okay, Alex, is it full screen? I can't hear you, Alex. Okay.
It is
Yeah.
not full screen, Laura.
If you go to from
There.
beginning, that should do it there. There we go.
Okay. Okay. I won't necessarily be able to see your hands if you raise a hand on the service. So Alex, just let me know if anyone has a question. Okay. As we get started, this is really just a refresher training that we do with all the boards. We do it periodically, and so it's not the in-depth training or anything, but it is a refresher. And if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. But mostly, you know it, and it won't be anything new to you. So we're going to start with let's see, make this thing move. Okay. Okay. These are the three statutes that we're going to be talking about. And the most relevant for you all is the Open Meetings Act. The Administrative Procedure Act is, rulemaking, Public Information Act, the documents. So these are all relevant, but we'll get into that. So the Open Meetings Act, we really need to pay attention to this because it's one of the most relevant things for how the board conducts itself. You have to meet in a quorum in a meeting that's open to the public, and the public has to have notice of that. And so we're going to talk about that. The whole overwhelming theme of all of this is transparency, the transparency of government. So let's see. So, as you know, a quorum is a majority of the board, and you have to meet to do any official act. You cannot do any official acts outside of the meeting, and you can't. I mean, you can discuss board business obviously outside of a meeting because that's what you do in work groups and that. But you have to be in a meeting to take any official action. And deliberation is basically what you talk about the conversation in a meeting. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the board members speaking to each other. It can be somebody giving a presentation to the board, still counts as a deliberation of the board that needs to be in an open meeting. And the technical meaning is when a quorum meets and engages in deliberation about public business. You might say, well, a work group does that, but it's not a quorum. So it's never a quorum in a work group. So you can have deliberation about public business, but you wouldn't obviously be able to take official action in a work group. And notice is basically what you've seen. The agenda is how we give notice. We have to give notice of the meeting. And the agenda basically is saying, you know, what the meeting's going to be about, and it can't we have to stick to what's in that agenda, and we can't just kind of veer off into other topics, because the whole purpose of public notice is the public won't know about what we're talking about if we talk about other things. So we have to stick to what's on that agenda because that's what they have notice of. So this is addressing, you know, whether you can have a meeting outside of a publicly noticed meeting like we're having. And, you know, we want you to be able to attend industry events and conferences and things like that. So if you happen to, you know, all be there, or a quorum is there, you can talk about, you know, the presentations and things at the meeting you're at. You just can't talk about public business, which is basically, you know, board matters. So you can talk about the industry, you can talk about remediation and that sort of thing, but you really can't go into detail about public business if there's a quorum of you. So that's just something to keep in mind if you all run into each other at a meeting or something. The mandate to only, you know, discuss things in a public meeting is easy to break if you get a quorum involved in things. So you really don't want to be talking to the members of your work group and then pull in somebody from another work group, and then that person pulls in someone else, and you know, they may not tell you they do that, but you know, if you start the chain, it can end up with the whole quorum being involved. So you really don't want to have discussions where it can go beyond less than a quorum. So you know, we don't have any problem with you, you know, talking to people in the industry and getting research and asking around, but you really don't want to talk about public business outside of your work group or your board meeting, and you don't want to bring in a quorum of the other members in any way. And it doesn't have to be all at the same time. It can be sequentially, you know, someone emails someone, and then a few days later, someone calls someone, that sort of thing. It's called a walking quorum. And we're going to talk about that. This is what we're talking about, where you get into, you know, any kind of communication with other members of the board, a quorum of them, and that's a walking quorum. And it, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's all done at the same time. You're at a, you know, a conference or something, y'all start talking about the rules. That would be, you know, a quorum, but a walking quorum is not necessarily everyone in the same room at the same time or on the same phone call. So you just kind of have to always keep that in mind about who you're pulling into a conversation or talking about something with. If you're on two work groups, you really don't need to be talking about the work of one work group with the other, because that's probably going to wind up being a quorum involved. So here's an example we give. This is this happens, people pulling other people by email or whatever. We often see a board member who communicates to someone by email, copies all the other board members. Well, that still counts. That's a walking quorum basically, because you've involved a quorum about public business. So you really don't even want to do that sort of thing, like copy all the board members. You can copy your work group members if you need to, but don't go outside of a less than a quorum meeting or discussion. And so these are just examples of how this can happen. If you're all, we used to have our meetings in person here, and it was real common for the board to want to keep talking about things after the meeting ended, and they couldn't do that because once it's done, that's the time that the quorum has to stop communicating. So it's just something you need to be aware of, and don't think the public isn't watching either, because you never know if you're at a conference, there could be one of the legislators there or something, and they know the Open Meetings Act, even if not every member of the public does. So you need to just kind of keep it in mind. And so, this is kind of what we're talking about. Don't meet in groups and then share with the rest of the board or even a few more members, because you can get to a quorum pretty quickly. A quorum only has to be, a majority. So if, say you're 11, it's 7, you don't have to involve the whole board for it to be a quorum. So just, something to keep in mind. And the last bullet there is polling, which is, you can't just, ask each member an opinion on something, because you're kind of being the clearinghouse there and you've got a quorum involved. So, again, you don't want to be doing that. And this, this is going into, like I was saying, we have to stay on the agenda because people haven't been noticed about what we're going to be talking about. It's really the same principle as rulemaking, where we give notice of a rulemaking and we can't add things and, without the public having notice of what we're doing. So if if it occurs to you during the meeting, it's something you want to talk about, or a public commenter speaks up, we can take that item and put it on the agenda for the next meeting. We just can't talk about it in that meeting because it hasn't been noticed. People just don't know what you're talking about if you bring up something new that's not on the agenda. So this is just basically what to do and what not to do. Stick to the agenda. Don't go off on tangents. There's some leeway there. If a discussion is within the scope of what's on the agenda, you're okay. You just don't want to go into new things or start taking up some small issue and ballooning that up into a whole discussion about something, and that's a tangent. So, and like I say, there's no problem with new issues coming up. We just can't have discussion about them. We have to put them on the agenda for the next time, or possibly assigned to a work group. There are penalties for Open Meetings Act violations, and it happens occasionally. It's pretty rare, but the main problem is that it goes to your credibility as a board if you do things behind the public's back. You don't want to be involving a quorum, and people catch on to that if you mention how you've been talking about something with everyone in between meetings. Again, there are penalties. The legislature takes it seriously that we obey the open meetings law, but it applies to every government body. It applies to local governments, the legislature itself, the governor's office. The Open Meetings Act just applies statewide. So if it's a governmental body, it has to obey it. So this is pretty much what we've been talking about. Just be careful of involving a quorum and stay on the agenda. Those are the main things. And so there's lots of resources. You know, I don't expect you to go out there and study every word of the Open Meetings Act, but there are plenty of resources if you need to know more. And if you have a question, you can always just, you know, give me a holler, or Alex can help you. There's always someone who can help you with it if you're, you know, confused or uncertain, or if you've done something and you're like, uh-oh, maybe that was wrong. You know, don't be afraid to check with us, because, you know, it's not the end of the world if a mistake happens, but we want you to be conscious of it. And so now we get into the Administrative Procedure Act, and this is all about rulemaking, and that is your task per statute, is to advise us on rules. So the Administrative Procedure Act covers basically, you know, process for all the agencies, and you know, the all the things that are involved with rulemaking. So you need to be aware. This statute is all about, you know, procedure, but rulemaking is like the main procedure you're going to be dealing with. So a rule is it implements, interprets, or prescribes law. That means it's something enforceable. It's us applying the statute and enforcing the statute. The statutes are, you know, for the mold statute, chapter 1958, that's the legislature's instructions to us as to how to regulate. And so the rule, you know, implements the statute and allows us to regulate. It gives the details and the specifics. Oh, and in this rulemaking that's coming up, we have, you know, a lot of these sources going into that rulemaking. We're doing some legislative changes, the demolition, the board input, which we have tons of that. We have the staff input, which is kind of like our take on things. The 4-year rule review, which just finished. The main thing we get from that is comments that we can use in rulemaking. And so, and a rule petition, I don't think we have one of those, but that's something that we, you know, can come up. We'll get into that. So the petition is, if a person wants a rule change, they can, you know, make a request, is what that is, to ask us to change something. And this can come in anytime. It doesn't have to be in a public meeting. It doesn't have to be in a public comment. It's just someone wants a change and they request it, and there's a procedure to request it. The board members don't have to do this, because you can convey to us during meetings and work groups, you know, what changes you want to see. But this is, you know, basically any other organization or person that wants to make this a rule change. Usually we hear about that in public comments, but it is a way for them to ask for change. This rulemaking process chart, it's kind of a reverse S. You start at the top left, and then you go across, and then you go down and back to the left. The steps, you know, in the rulemaking, it's kind of a nutshell, but we're going to get into this in the rulemaking process discussions. I'm not going to beat you over the head with it here too. So we'll just go past this slide, and I'll pull it up later when we talk about rulemaking. This is the rule review process, and like I said, we just wrapped that up, and all agencies have to do it for all their rules every 4 years from the time the rule is created. And so the MOLD program goes through this every 4 years, like all the other ones. The main thing we get from it is public comment, because the rule review doesn't make any changes. It doesn't, you know, post changes or suggest changes. All it is, do we still need these rules? Well, if the program's still going on, we usually need the rules. But the public comment part of it is, you know, something that's valuable, because we can use those comments when we do the next rulemaking if things are just not working right in the program. So we do have comments from rule reviews usually, and a lot of times they're the same ones that we've gotten on rulemakings, but could be different. And, you know, again, there's lots of sources on state rulemaking, and it's not something you unless you have a really burning desire, you're going to go study on your own, but you're going to be real familiar with the process just by going through it uh, for your own rules. And the Public Information Act, it's important. It's less because it's not quite as relevant to your everyday work as a board member, but it's out there, and the main thing you need to know is that anything you write, look at, whatever is subject to the Open Meetings Act. So, or I mean, the Public Information Act. So this is its purpose is to keep government transparent. The taxpayers have a right to know what their tax dollars are paying for, and they pay for us to regulate you. So that's what it's all about. Any documents we have, research, records, public comments, all of that is government documents. And those are open to the public for transparency. And the one thing you really want to be concerned about is like what you put in emails and letters and things, because you're a board member, those are going to be public documents that, a lot of times we can protect something. If you happen to mention in an email that your wife is sick or something, that, a personal or private information like that can be withheld. But, if you make derogatory comments about another board member or something, and, that's going to be a public document, and we can't always protect what's said. The protections are limited for a purpose because of the transparency. So any emails, any texts, any posting on social media, everything you say in a meeting, of course, is recorded. So all of that is public information. And you may get a request. They have to be in writing, and that's on our website. We have a portal where people can make these requests, and they make thousands of them every year. And so, but they have to be in writing, and usually it'll come through the portal. And that's when we start looking for the documents, whatever they're asking for. And then we have a certain amount of time to respond and a certain amount of time to produce the records. If there's a whole lot of them, we can get some extra time, but we're on a timeline. So as a board member, if someone asked you for documents, you have to remember, you can't just give them out, and you need to get the request over to us. If you get it in writing, you can forward that. But if someone asks you for documents, you can say, I cannot give you the documents. It has to go through the Public Information Act process, which is you have to make a request in writing to the agency to get them. So, you'd be surprised at what things are actually confidential. One thing is rule drafts. Those are protected until the rule is actually proposed out there in public in the Texas Register. So you never really know what you could give out or not, what's public or not. So, we need to have it go through our channels to protect whatever we need to or have to protect before you hand anything out. So you just want to not share materials with people outside the board, because they could be something that is confidential. May not seem confidential, but is. We don't ask people why they want records, so they can ask for anything and we can't ask them why. We just have to produce it. And this is kind of a little list of things that we wouldn't give out. The courthouses used to have all these documents public, and they had people's social security numbers and stuff, and that they finally figured that out not to do that. And so we protect those things, like any kind of identifying number, bank account number, whatever it is that we have. Those are just no-brainers, and we can even redact those without a ruling. Most things that are asked for that fall under an exemption or an exception from release, we have to get the AG, the Attorney General, opinion about whether we should release it or not. So if you get an email or a note or whatever it is that's written, and they want documents or whatever it is, a recording, a photo, an inspection report, whatever it is, we just need to go get it through the channel. So just remember that, get it to us, get it to the Open Records team, get it to, to the open records people or to us. We know what to do with it when we get it. It's just, it's something that's got to be done quickly. So if you get that, get it to us quick. Again, lots of resources out there. If you have a question, always feel free to just shout to us because, you really don't want you to have this burden of researching and all. If you're welcome to if you want to, but we're a much better shortcut to get the information you need. So if anyone has any questions, I can answer those, or we'll just we'll move on. But also in the discussion about rulemaking, I'll go into that process more there.
Hi, this is Gary Stanford.
Uh-huh.
I had received an article from Josh Katz with Bickerstaff, Heath, Delgado, Acosta, LLP, an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Presentation he made to the Texas Court Clerks Association, which his summary is that basically the TOM, or the walking quorum, is dead. Are you familiar with that article?
I don't think I've seen that.
May I send that to you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I see it as something that is necessary, but it's also a hindrance to getting stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a two-edged sword, obviously.
Right. Yeah, and we use work groups to try to get things done, like you say, without having to do that all in a public meeting. But yeah, I'd like to see the article because the law could always change. The legislature wrote these laws; they could change them and allow the communications outside of the
He
public
concluded
meeting.
that that it is unconstitutionally vague, and it has a court case or two to cite that. I'll pass that on to you.
Okay.
Excellent. Any more questions? Comments? All right, Laura, thank you for that. Appreciate it. All good
Thank you.
information for us to be aware of. All right, next agenda item is the approval of our minutes from our meeting on March 18th of 2024. Assume you all have received those. I am looking for a motion and a second to approve those meetings. Meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Victor,
I second.
who was the second? I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Blake Howard.
Blake? Okay, thank you. Next is our public comment. At this time, we do not have any public comments that were submitted.
Mr. Jeter,
Yes.
I can go ahead and do a roll for that, for the vote.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And who was who had made the motion?
Victor.
I did.
Ochoa.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, this is a vote for the motion and second for approval of minutes, March 18th, 2024. Gary Stanford,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Gary Stanford.
Yes, what is the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is a vote. We're going to do a vote for the approval of the minutes.
Yes,
Antonio Pena,
Yes, approve.
Marion Armstrong,
Yes.
Victor Ochoa,
In favor.
Blake Howard,
Approve.
Bruce Okrulik,
Approved.
Brad Gam,
Yes.
Luis Acuna,
Approved.
and Presiding Officer Chris Jeter.
Approved.
Okay, sir, the motion has passed.
Excellent. Yeah. All right, we're moving on to the next one, staff reports. These will be briefings from our staff, and there will be time for discussion as well. We'll start with the licensing division, go over statistics. That will be presented by Charo McCain.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Chara McCain, and I'm a team lead of Health Professions Team Licensing Division. And I'm here to present to you the staff statistics report for mold remediation and assessment program. So I'll go ahead and start with the company licenses that we issued as of the first quarter of 2026. For mold analysis laboratory, we issued 3 new licenses. 8 licenses were renewed with a total population of 60. For assessment company, we issued 3 new licenses. 12 were renewed and a total population of 189. For mold remediation company, 21 new licenses were issued. 36 were renewed with a total population of 403. Now let's go to the individual licenses. For mold assessment consultant, we have issued 34 new licenses. 85 licenses were renewed with a total population of 873. For mold remediation contractor, we issued 40 new licenses. 72 were renewed with a total population of 766. For mold assessment technician, we issued 12 new licenses. 19 licenses were renewed with a total population of 225. And lastly, for mold remediation worker, 399 new licenses were issued. 175 licenses were renewed with a total population of 3,298. And this concludes my report, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Yes, Gary Stanford here. On
Yes,
the
sir.
overall, has there been a decline in the total number of licensees or people not renewing, or is the population remaining pretty steady?
I believe it's pretty steady, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Charo. Moving on to the next, education examination division. Going over statistics and updates. That will be by our director, Mr. Michael Strawn.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Michael Strawn. I'm the new director for our Education Examination Division. Here to give you our Education Examination Division report today. As you see on your screen and as you have in your handouts, we have the list of the mold examination statistics in front of you. Overall, between this fiscal year and last fiscal year, we've seen a slight rise in the pass rate from about 50 to 56%. Given we're only in Q2 of this year and last fiscal year up until Q4, we were about the same pass rate, if not higher. So if we stay on this path, we should end with a little bit higher pass rate there. So that's exciting news to see. But overall volume is a little bit higher as well from what we've seen. What you saw in licensing's report is they did have an increase in some of the licenses issued in FY25. So due to some of the rule and law changes, we expect to see that come out within the examination statistics as well. And if you'll scroll down for me. And this is just the breakout of the different exam portion statistics. If you wanted to see all the different from the MAC to the MAT, the MRC, the different pass rates for each of their examination types by each quarter as well. What you saw above was just the culmination of all these added in together. And if you'll scroll down for me a little bit further. And then we have the mold continuing education statistics. You'll see last year we maintained for many years, actually, we've had 11 continuing education providers. And then in Q3 and Q4 of FY25, we ended up increasing up to 14 total providers. And that's where we remain moving into FY26 at this point. And lastly, we wanted to go into our updates. And this was really dealing with the continuing education audits that our division is doing. So anytime the candidate or a licensee is coming up for their renewal, their continuing education requirements that they have for their licensure, of course, you're always required to obtain that and have that ready for presentation to the department. Our division is running a report. We're reaching out to individuals and telling them they're selected for audit. And so it's imperative for a number of reasons that you hold on to your records. Number one, that you can provide it during that audit, because our team is going to reach out to you and let you know that you are going to have to provide proof of those CE hours to us at the end of the day. I cannot talk today. I apologize. So we have information on our website about this process, but you'll get a notification in the mail, just like you get your license renewal, an email letting you know that you've been selected for audit and what you need to provide to the department. We just want to make sure everybody is aware, because that's something that we are doing with this industry. And if you do get something in the mail from us about a continuing education audit, please do comply with it. We do have information on there how to contact us if you have any questions, and our team stands by ready to answer any questions. That concludes my report, and I'm open for any questions that you have as well.
Gary Stanford with another question. Who is providing TDLR with the technical expertise to create the exam questions for whatever category or license there is?
Absolutely. So our examinations here at TDLR are developed in part with a psychometrician along with subject matter experts across the industry. So any TDLR, or a lot of times you'll hear it dubbed a PSI examination as our current vendor. These examinations are developed with industry leaders. So we will bring in Macs that have experience, in this field, licensed in this field, to help us develop items for this examination. For the MRC exam, you would see the same thing, or any examination that we have, from barbering cosmetology all the way to property tax professionals. This is the same methodology we use. My staff, myself, we are not electricians. We're not mold remediation specialists. So we bring in industry leaders that help us develop those examinations for each of our examinations.
You do not bring in the mold advisory board, since, and or the name of those practitioners available?
Michael Strawn, Education Examination Division. Mr. Stanford, are you asking if we make public who those members are in the exam review committees?
Yes.
So very good question. Typically, we do not announce the names of individuals that are on the exam review committee for a host of reasons. We do not want individuals that are seeking exam item assistance, help, or anything else to badger or bother those individuals to look for answers, questions, anything else they may be privy to. Of course, every person that signs up to serve on our exam review committee does sign non-disclosure agreements and everything else, so they shouldn't be sharing that information. But we typically don't list it due to the fact that it does cause some issues in the past with some of the people that are volunteering their time, their service, and everything else for that purpose. If part of your question is also our advisory board members a part of that, they can be. Of course, we still have to adhere to everything that you heard earlier from Laura regarding, quorum. We still run to that issue as well. So we can't just have only advisory board members within the exam review committee, but oftentimes there are advisory board members that are also part of our exam review committees as well. You're muted,
This is
sir.
Brad Gam, I have a question. Michael, following up on what you just said, there is an education work group of this advisory board. Was that education work group consulted, given an opportunity to participate, any review? I know that there was one meeting in May, approximately May of 2024, no meetings of that work group since that time. Was the education work group consulted or brought into that process?
Michael
As a
Strawn,
resource.
Education Examination Division. So I will give a little bit of information. I've been director of E&E since December of 2025, so about 4 months now. I will tell you that for all of our work groups, if there is something appropriate for that work group, they are consulted. The examination work groups for education and examination are not necessarily tied to development of the examination. They may determine the outline or the information that needs to be covered within that, but they're not going to be a group separate and apart from our exam review committee that is done in tandem with our examination vendor to create items. So the answer to your question would be potentially. I do not know about that specific work group, the last one, what was discussed in that one. But that would be the limitation of it. Those individuals in our education work group are not going to develop items. However, they could set out standards by which what books, materials, sites that they're utilizing um, for the basis of that exam review committee to utilize. If there was an industry standard across the board,
Mr. Strawn,
codes, anything else.
we really can't get into a big discussion of how the exams are done because that's not on the agenda. So, we might, if the board wants to talk about this more in depth, we can either assign a work group or take it up in the next meeting. We'll just have to put it on the agenda for next time.
And this is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director for Licensing and Regulatory Services, Mr. Chairman and board members and everyone. Just wanted to add in, without going further, as Laura said, that everything Ford is saying is standard across all of our advisory boards and exam development. And as Laura said, we could either have a work group meeting to discuss it further, or certainly put it on the agenda for next time. But this is a pretty standard way that we conduct our advisory boards and develop exams.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Michael, and Gary and Brad. Thank you for your questions. We'll have.
This is Antonio. I just got one quick question on the auditing portion. One quick question on that is, as part of the renewal, because I just did my renewal not too long ago, as a Mac, part of the requirement when we submit our renewal application is that we provide a certificate indicating that we've taken our 8 hours of continuing education. During that audit process, do you guys review any of those renewal applications to see if those certificates are there, or is it just something that you just randomly pick people to go through and do those audits?
So, Michael Strawn, Education Examination Divisions. Very good question. When you are selected for audit, everything is on the table. So, kind of yes to both of your questions. We could choose to do 100% audit. We may choose individuals at random for the audits, depending on the size of the industry. Well, a lot of times we'll dictate that. This is a smaller industry, one that we can look at it at greater levels. But if we are doing an audit, we are looking at every single requirement that you had for your licensure. So everything would come into play, including that certificate.
All right. Any more questions? Gary and Brad, later on, there'll be an opportunity to recommend agenda items for our next board meeting. I think that would be a good topic for y'all to bring up. So, all right, next on our agenda item is our customer service division. Myra Rodriguez going over our statistics.
Good morning, board members and TDLR staff. My name is Myra Rodriguez, and I am one of the customer service managers that oversees this program for our division. As you can see before you, the statistics for the fiscal year 2026, quarter one and quarter two. They're pretty across the board standard contacts in comparison to fiscal year 2025. We are slightly higher in our contacts. For example, for February, our total contacts are 461 total. That is 40 emails and 421 phone calls. And this concludes my report. I'm available if you have any questions for me.
All right, no questions. Thank you, Myra.
Thank you.
Next is our enforcement division. For Andrew Linsby.
Good morning, board members. My name is Andrew Lisenby, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. I'll present the division's report focusing on key statistics involving mold prosecution cases. The report begins with the division's performance measures through the month of January, comparing fiscal years 2025 and 2026 for the mold remediation program and TDLR as a whole. In fiscal year 2025, 42 complaints were opened, with 27 closed, compared to 58 complaints opened and 32 closed at the same time in fiscal year 2026. As you can see, the average time to close a case grew from about 155 days in fiscal year 2025 to about 260 days in fiscal year 2026, but this is likely a result of the increased focus on closing out our older cases. The next section is the criminal history review for applicants who may have disqualifying criminal histories. As you can see, 512 applications were reviewed for criminal history, resulting in 17 open cases for review by this time in fiscal year 2025. The number of applications reviewed for criminal history at the same time in fiscal year 2026 increased to about 753, with 21 cases open, but this increase is proportionate with the numbers from the previous fiscal year. In both years, no licenses were denied or revoked resulting from a review of criminal history in the mold program. The following section details where the Enforcement Division's mold complaints originated, whether from consumers or from within the department. By January 2026, 129 complaints arose from consumers and 23 came from the department, compared to 73 consumer complaints and 7 from the department by the same time last fiscal year. With the large number of mold cases, this difference is not abnormal. Below is a pie graph based on the number of cases opened. As you can see, the proportion of complaints received by the department from consumers, department investigations, and arising from criminal history investigations is relatively equal within the mold program and TDLR as a whole. In the caseloads and enforcement section, we see a higher number of active complaints in fiscal year 2026 as compared to the same time last fiscal year, but with changes in department staffing, this is also not abnormal. The next section shows the orders issued. There was one agreed order so far in fiscal year 2026 as compared to no orders at the same time in fiscal year 2025. Next, because there were no orders at this time in fiscal year 2025, there were no resulting penalties or consumer remedies, but the department assessed and collected $3,250 related to the agreed order from fiscal year 2026 discussed above. In the licenses with disciplinary sanctions section, we see that there were no revocations or suspensions from the mold program by this time in either fiscal year 2025 or 2026. In the cases closed without disciplinary action section below, we see a similar number of cases closed in both fiscal years. Finally, in the bottom two sections, we have the breakdown of alleged violations at opening and the violations that resulted in disciplinary actions. As you can see, there aren't significant differences between last fiscal year and this one. This concludes my report for the Enforcement Division's key statistics, but there are also two case highlights below for your review. As a note, in the case highlight for Mold Test Company at the bottom, there is a typo. Where it says mold remediation activities, it should say mold assessment instead. And I'm available to answer your questions.
Gary Stanford here. Um, in terms of enforcement, is most of the the situations you deal with on the consultant side or the remediation side?
I do not have a breakdown right now of the difference between assessment and consultant cases, but we can try to find that information and get it to you.
Thank you.
Brad Gam, I have a question. Is it accurate that the enforcement work group has never had a meeting since the board was established in 2024?
I'm sorry, I don't have information on the work group activities, but I'm sure we can also find an answer for you and get that to you.
This is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director. I'll just throw in as well that if, regardless of whether or not that is the case, if that work group would like to meet, we can certainly get that arranged during this meeting for a future meeting of that work group.
Gary Stanford again. Steve, I had a question. So it is optional for the work groups to meet or not meet?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Stanford, I'd say in general, the way that I see it working is that work groups, depending on their category, meet, as needed at various times. And certainly, if there's been a gap in meetings, it is not uncommon for work groups to get together just to sort of catch up and talk about what's going on. So it's, I will make sure that everything I'm saying is okay with our general counsel, with Ms. Pfefferly, but I believe that it's up to the presiding officer and up to those work group chairs to say, hey, we need to have a work group meeting, and our staff is here to help you get that set up, including Mr. Ortiz from our advisory board's team.
Gary Stanford.
This is Laura Pepperly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
What the heck are we doing then if we're on the mold advisory board and we are looking at the mold rules and we may or may not meet? If those board members are unwilling or unable or uninterested in doing the job, perhaps we should restaff the board.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that we would need to make that a specific agenda item. I'll defer to our general counsel, but I would say that it's up to the board chair and the members. And if there are members who are not living up to the duties they need to be done, then we can certainly adjust those members so that the board has what it feels is the right mix of representation and participation. But we can definitely make changes to that if needed.
This is Laura Pefferly, Office of General Counsel. We can talk more about work groups in the rulemaking process, but yeah, I wanted to clarify that the boards are not required to have work groups meet, and some boards have, one or two work groups, and the other two hardly ever meet. There are four basic kinds that meet, and unless there are like a lot of enforcement questions going on, that one, it's okay if it doesn't meet as often as maybe the standard of care work group meets. So, and that's basically up to the board and the presiding officer to decide, how often they need to meet and when they'll meet and which ones will meet. So that's, that's at y'all's discretion. So I'll stop there, but we will cover this a little more later on.
This is Antonio Pina. I got one quick question for you, Andrew. On the alleged violations and the disciplinary actions, that's not a all-encompassing list of what you guys had. That's more of a highlight, probably some of the more well-known violations and things like that. That's not an all-encompassing list.
I can verify that for you, and we'd have to get that information to you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to double check because it looks like, based off the violations, it looks like most of the stuff that that enforcement's dealing with seems to be more on the remediation side than the consultant side. But I know that's one of the things the board's kind of wanting to try and crack down on some of the consultants a little bit more. But we can get into that a little bit later.
Thank you, Antonio. And I do have a quick comment as Chris Jeter, board chair. I know over the last 2 years, I've asked on several occasions about getting a board meeting scheduled. And I've also asked about the work groups and how often they've been meeting and how often and who chooses when. And I have basically been told that that is not in my decision-making abilities. So if it is part of my decision-making abilities, well, that's great. I'd like to have a bigger discussion on that later on, because I'm sure a lot of these board members, as I, would like to meet on a much more regular basis because we feel there are a lot of changes that need to happen and updates that need to be looked at so that we can get this industry working in a better, well, at least put it in a better place.
Well, again, this is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director. I'm not sure what's happened in the past, but starting right now, let's get you those meetings set and let's get these discussions happening.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Andrew, thank you for that. I knew we'd have quite a few engagements there. Next is our compliance division. Travis Stucker.
Good morning, Chair, Advisory Board members, and all those in the meeting today. My name is Travis Stucker. I'm one of the 3 environmental protection specialists for the mold program, TDLR Compliance Division. We've had quite a few changes in the mold program recently. In March, Compliance welcomed Vanessa Vasquez as our new Consumer Protection Manager, and she'll be overseeing the mold program. The program has been working with the Education Examination Division to develop quarterly and regional meetings and webinars to discuss topics like documentation requirements and rules, rule interpretations, what to expect during inspections, and we will have a question and answer period usually at the end of those presentations. We are out in the field conducting inspections and providing outreach efforts. We're utilizing a standard inspection platform called Field-to-Base. This allows us consistency in our inspections throughout the state. We also use Field-to-Base when we conduct desktop inspections. We continue to improve communication to those in the industry and welcome any feedback. The team has also been working diligently on Senate Bill 1255 implementation. Some statistics: fiscal year 2025, the team completed 439 inspections. 190 of those inspections were in full compliance. 83 inspections resulted in being referred to the Enforcement Division. In fiscal year 2026, we've completed 208 inspections through the end of February. 90 of those inspections were in full compliance. 20 inspections resulted in being referred to the Enforcement Division. This year's inspection numbers are tracking with the previous year. We should end the year with roughly the same amount of inspections. Outreach. TDLR wants to be a resource for the industry, and we can accomplish this through education and webinars, providing guidance documents, communicating consistent, constant information. Some of the guidance documents that we've prepared are information on notifications, changes in the mold law, or what our inspections look like. And through our outreach, we have seen a reduction in repeat violations. Communication is key. The team has responded to over 350 emails to our inbox. The mold team provided technical assistance to licensees, consumers, and the general public, as well as just answering general mold-related questions. We encourage questions, and we ensure open and honest communication and transparency. Some upcoming priorities for fiscal year 2026: to better identify our high-risk factors, working on developing inspection analytics, and increase our outreach, especially those that are new to the industry. Our goal is to continuously improve our internal processes and our communication. This concludes the Compliance Division staff report. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
Brad Gam, I have a couple of questions, if I may. The compliance division effort, I don't recall any of those falling under any of the previously established work groups. For example, not under the enforcement or the education. Is that accurate or not?
I believe that the standard of care would probably fall more under compliance, but for enforcement and examination, I would defer to those departments.
So it sounds like something to be helpful to clarify, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Second, there are periodic newsletters that are published by TDLR staff to the licensee community. There was one in April of 2025. Is that the compliance division that is the author or responsible for issuing those newsletters, and specifically that April newsletter?
Travis Tucker, Compliance Division. Yes, we have been putting out communications to the industry, specifically to help those in industry interpret the rules.
And in the last 2 years, for any newsletter that compliance put out, was this advisory board consulted, contacted, used as a resource at any time for those newsletters? And I'll use as an example the April 2025 newsletter.
Well, that would depend.
Michael Strawn.
Mr. Advisory Member Gam, this is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director. I don't know that we normally consult with advisory boards when we put out newsletters. Is there something that you're concerned about that was in that newsletter? Was there inaccurate information? Because we obviously want to make sure what we're putting out is correct.
And if I may interject, Michael Strawn, Education Examination Division. So the April newsletter that was sent out by, and all the newsletters that are sent out are reviewed not only by our OSC team for just grammar accuracy or anything else. As you heard Steve said, our common notifications out to an industry are not usually a consultation with the work groups. The information that is in there, if there's ever a determination or clarification of rule or law, whether it was new license types, there is a interpretation of contiguous square footage or anything else, is something that is reviewed by our general counsel as well for accuracy before we put out that notice. So depending on what it is, it may or may not be reviewed by different departments. For example, if we're introducing the team or we're saying, here's a highlight of what to expect during inspections, those are not something that's going to be fully reviewed by general counsel. If there's a rule requirement, new statute, or anything like that, we will coordinate with those. But typically notices to the industry, because they are a department newsletter and information, are not a consultation with a work group.
This is Gary Stanford again. To answer your question directly, in that newsletter, the interpretation of the 25 contiguous square foot rule is absolutely insane. Don't know where you got your technical expertise, but it is not something that is standard practice in this industry. In 2025, when we put together the mole rules, that was never the intent that the containment would be calculated as a 25 contiguous square feet of visible mold. So again, the expertise, I really would like to know where the TDLR is getting this kind of input instead of the resource that you have available here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think
if I'm not
this is Chris
mistaken,
Cheever,
that's
Chair. I think we're seeing a common trend that a lot of things are happening, and for 2 years now, we've been silent and not communicated with And when asked about having meetings, I've just gotten basically, hey, when we need you, we'll send out an invite.
Okay, well, let's correct that. As we've said a few times earlier in this meeting, Mr. Chairman, let's make sure that you're able to set the meetings you want. And I see that we have an agenda item coming up, H, interpretation of the 25 contiguous square foot rule. So we'll be talking about that in depth in this meeting.
When will be appropriate, Blake Howard, when will be appropriate for us to set meetings? We keep saying later on, we'll do it later on. Is that an agenda item? Or
Like that is
something
an agenda item. We will be getting to that after our discussion and our update on the work groups. So that'll be right before adjournment. We'll be discussing agenda items and next dates, possible dates for meetings.
This is Antonio Pena. I got one quick question for you, Travis, on the compliance side. As far as the compliance, I know it's a lot easier for you guys to be able to pop in and do surprise inspections during the remediation process itself, because a lot of that has to be notifications to the state and everything's like that. But is there any way that you guys are able to review the consultant's protocol, make sure that's being done in accordance with the state requirements? And is there any possibility of you guys being able to maybe get in contact with a couple of consultants, see what their schedule looks like, maybe do a surprise inspection on one of their inspections as they're doing an assessment itself to ensure that they're actually following more of industry standards as it's called out in our rules and regulations and everything, because I know that's one of the issues we're having with some consultants throughout the state is they're just going through doing willy-nilly stuff, and we're the ones that are doing stuff in accordance with industry standard are having to push back and fight back against some of those.
Travis Tucker, compliance. Thank you for your question. And yes, we have reached out to the mold assessment consultants. We typically do this through a desktop audit because we're not necessarily informed of when they are conducting an assessment. But yeah, I have reached out to see if I could be available when an assessment is being conducted, but I have not been invited. But we will review documentation, assessments, protocols, information gathered during the assessment process through our desktop audit process, desktop inspection process.
Mr. Stucker, Marion Armstrong. Has compliance considered obtaining a copy of the mold assessment report that is associated with the mold remediation protocol that is attached to the notification to the state of a remediation project underway?
Travis Tucker, Compliance Division, yes. So our notifications are provided by the MRCs or the RCOs, and we can see who is the mold assessment consultant on that project. And we will, at times, reach out to that mold assessment consultant to get a copy of the assessment and the protocol prior to us conducting an on-site inspection.
All right. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
All right. Next is the agency update. Steve Bruno.
Thank you very much. Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director for Licensing and Regulatory Services. A few quick updates. You'll notice that I'll say Licensing and Regulatory Services as opposed to Lottery and Bingo Services. Last legislative session, there were several changes made, including the absorption by TDLR of the state's lottery and bingo programs. So that certainly kept us very busy during this time. The other important update I want to share with you is about our project called TDLR Core, that's CORE. And that's a multi-year project we're currently undertaking to modernize our licensing systems. You all are familiar with the transition process as your program was assigned to us from previous agencies. And as that's happened to our agency over the years, we've acquired several different systems that we use to process licenses, keep track of renewals, and do all of that work. So we are right now in a very exciting phase of implementing a modern and safe and secure system that's more user-friendly for both you all, our external users, and for our staff, our internal users. I'll be giving you updates about that as it progresses. We don't have a schedule yet for the mold program. We're working program by program to roll these out, but things that you can expect to see are more friendly and easier internet interactions, a safer and secure environment, and just more updates on things like where your license is in the process and things like that. So that's one big project in addition to the program changes that we're making. I know that we've heard a lot today, and I hope that we can use this meeting to reset and Mr. Chairman, make sure that you know that you are able to call these work group meetings as needed. I know that there's been a couple of very important topics brought up where there's disagreement about what we said, and I'm very excited to see that those items are on the agenda. This is your all's meeting, and we do rely on you for expertise. So it sounds like we've got some work to do, Mr. Chairman and board members, but as you've properly noted, we do have agenda items coming up to both discuss the issues, assign and possibly reassign work groups, and get those meetings set so that we can have a more robust communication going forward and really provide you all in your industry with what you need. And with that, I will finally mention one important thing coming up. Please pay attention. You'll be receiving emails and notifications about our strategic planning process. As you all are familiar, this is the time of the year in state government where agencies prepare their strategic plans, which lay out goals and objectives for the future. And we would love to continue to get your input on those. You'll be receiving surveys, and there'll be information about opportunities to provide input in public. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you all have.
Gary Stanford. So, in terms of the meeting agenda, will we be discussing specific issues before we adjourn?
Yes, sir. As I'm looking at the agenda, let's see, we're on item G now, and item H has two discussion items, the 25 contiguous square foot rule and the term mycotoxins and the definition based on, I believe, some legislative changes. Then the agenda item after that, we'll discuss work groups and possible creation of new work groups. Then the recommendations for next board meetings and dates and times. And that can also include work groups and times that you all would like to meet as well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Next item, discussion for upcoming rulemaking. Going back to Laura Pfefferly.
Okay, again, since we're going to be talking about the rulemaking process, I'm going to put the slide up on the screen so you can kind of follow along with that. Okay, I having trouble keeping this on this page. Before I get into the process for rulemaking, and if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Laura Pefferly with the General Counsel's Office. I do want to apologize for the dead ends and fits and starts in the mold program that you've been aware of and going through. we have had several changes in staff, not just in compliance, but I mean, agency-wide, we have changes, but in the attorney handling the program, we've had changes. And uh, your last work group meetings were actually held when Jonathan Parker was the general counsel. And so I was not at the agency at that point. So more than in agreement that we are due for rule changes. And we had mentioned before that that we saw it as a two rulemaking process, and that's really how that's going to fall out as far as I could see. So I'm going to talk about that as we go through the process of what rulemaking is. So I'm right now I'm going to start with the chart and kind of go through the process and sort of add a few comments in there as we go about where we're at with the current rulemaking. So if you start at the top left, the rule idea and drafting, and then the internal review and analysis, that is really where we are now and have been for quite some time. But that is where the work groups come in and the board comes in with, meeting, working out what issues are coming up, going over the public comments we've received from, rule review and even from previous rule reviews or rulemakings that haven't been addressed or haven't been addressed fully. So we go through everything that's come up, and a large part of what we get as far as input is from inquiries from the industry, MACs and remediators who contact us because they have an issue and they don't really understand what the rule means or how it applies to them. So a lot of times, we get those kind of queries, and then we need to look at things and we realize, yeah, that could be clearer. We should, fix that next time. So we're always sort of keeping a list of what we need to change in the rules. We can't really pull the board in as much as you might like to, because there's just not enough time to have meetings all the time, but we're always accumulating, the problems that come up, the ideas that come up, the problems with the rules that come up, and even the statute. I should say, we covered in another slide on here about for rulemaking. And one of those is petitions, another is public comment, ideas from staff, ideas from, compliance, where that's where the rubber meets the road. They're out there doing inspections and seeing what's happening, from the board, from the work groups. So all of that, we collect all of that, and the work groups, they can meet, as often as you all want to. There just isn't always something on the, front burner that has to be addressed. So some work groups don't need to meet as often as others. And that's entirely up to the board how often they meet. You don't want to, overburden anyone with lots and lots of them, but, and if there isn't something really going on, there's really not a need to meet. So it's really at your discretion and at the work group's discretion. Whoever is a member on a work group is up to the presiding officer to either assign people or take volunteers if people are interested in being on a certain work group or two, that's fine. You know, it's up to the presiding officer to decide who you want on there. You usually want a good mix of people who are most, you know, into that area. As far as enforcement, as far as I know, that work group hasn't met. It may have been assigned, you know, people may have been assigned to that, but there probably wasn't a huge need for that one to meet because there was a lot of things to work out in the other work groups first. So that could very well change as we go along. That, you know, we want to have the enforcement work group meet. We've had, you know, some changes, I think, on membership maybe, or maybe not, but on the work groups, whoever was on them before, that can be changed. You know, you can do that today. You can, we have it on the agenda to discuss, you know, work groups. It's up to the presiding officer to decide who's going to be on them, and what they're going to work on. So if you know, have lots of things for standard of care and nothing for enforcement, there's no problem with just having standard of care meet or licensing meet and putting off, you know, enforcement meeting if there's no need for that at the current time. Most of our work groups meet probably 2 to 3 times in between board meetings, but it's totally flexible. You know, they can meet as often or as infrequently as necessary. Some of our boards very seldom have a work group meeting because there's just not a lot going on. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So like I said, we're at this upper left part of the rulemaking process, and all of this is controlled by the Administrative Procedure Act. So I've been telling you about some of the things that go on behind the scenes as far as what we're looking at in between board meetings for us to run the program and figure out what's going good and what's not in the program. The Administrative Procedure Act underlies all of this. That's what this process is fashioned around. To do a rulemaking, there are very precise steps and very precise requirements from the law that tell us how we have to do this. And so I'm going to walk through it, but you know, this is not something we make up. This comes from the statute, and you know, these are steps we have to take. So the first thing we need to do when we do a rule is get all this input and kind of digest that so that we can figure out what rules need to be changed. Well, in mold, you know, we have a lot of rules that need to be changed, and the work groups that have already worked on it and the work that's been done in the past has resulted in a draft. And I've been working on synthesizing, you know, a lot of this material into the draft. And that's not to do it behind your back because, you know, you're going to know about all of it. It's mostly because writing rules is not something that the board is going to want to do or is tasked with doing. You know, our job is to get the rule text the way it needs to be, but that is, you know, a function of what the changes are that the board wants. So we don't ask you to, you know, to draft rules. That's our job to draft them, but we don't, you know, we don't pass anything behind your back, and we don't do anything behind your back except work on what that rule needs to say as far as we can tell. And then in the work groups, that's when you'll be looking at this draft that we have, and you know, we'll be talking about it with you. You know, here's why we made this change. Do you agree? Do you not? Do you think we need more or less? That's where you're going to give us input. Eventually, you know, this is as it moves along, you'll see how that happens, but no one does anything behind your back. The legislature changes the law sometimes. We don't have anything to do with them changing it, except for the fact that we do this strategic planning, like Steve was talking about, and we collect all of this kinds of, you know, input in that process as well. And the legislature can take that input and they can make changes in the statutes, but the agency is not allowed to lobby, and that's basically what it would be. If we try to get the legislature to write the law a certain way, that's called lobbying. We can't do it. The board can't do it. You can do it as individuals, but you can't say, well, I'm a representative of the board and we think you should do this. You can't do that either because that's lobbying. So, you know, every individual in the state has the right to ask the legislature anything they want to ask them, but you can't do it as a state agency, and you can't do it even as a board of a state agency. saying that you're representing that agency because it's just against the law. So whatever you see, whatever bills come through are, you know, obviously what we have to implement. Now, when they're introduced, they often look a lot different from when they finally get passed. But all of that is a public process. It's not our process, it's the legislature's, but you can go online to Texas Legislature Online, which is the state's legislature site for the bills. And as soon as the bills are filed, there's a public record. It's all right there on Texas Legislature Online. You can go in and search for bills on mold or any other subject in the world that the legislature may be having a bill on. And there, thousands of them are introduced every year. Some of them don't make it. Some of them die out early. Some make it almost to the end. Some make it to the end and then they get vetoed. But you can always go look. This SB 1255 that passed, the moment it was introduced, it went up on that Texas Legislature Online and you could read it. You could read when the committees were going to meet. You can go to the committee, you can comment in the committee. All of that is just totally open. And so I urge you to go look at the site now before the next session starts so that you can kind of get familiar with how to look up a bill, which is very simple. You can look them up by the bill number, or you can look up the subject matter and see all the bills that were filed, whether they died or they stayed alive. They're all there, and all the committee meetings are there. There's even recordings of a lot of the committee meetings, and there's links right there to them. So, we're not trying to hide anything from you in the legislative process. It isn't our process, it's the legislature's. But, if you ask us what bills are going through, we're probably going to know about them. It's just that during session, we have, like 50-something programs now and thousands of bills to look at. And so we don't always have a lot of time to do a lot of outreach about, hey, there's a bill going through. And usually the industries are pretty well aware of that because, they watch for that, and you can go on TLO and search to see what bills are coming on. But a lot of times people in the industry have been involved with the legislators before the bill is even proposed, to figure out what wording needs to be in there. So, we have to implement the bills. That's one of the inputs in the rulemaking process is any bill changes that, have come along, which, is a change to the law. So we are implementing SB 1255 in this rulemaking, in this process, but we always do that. If there's any legislative changes, those go into the rulemaking process, along with the input from, the regulated community, the board, the work groups, all of that goes into it. And like I said, we're not doing it behind your back. It's just that you have no capacity to be around for every single thing that happens and everything we do because it's just impossible. You have your own jobs to do. So we're not hiding it from you. We're just trying to do a lot behind the scenes to kind of condense it all and process it, but you're going to know about it. And, the public comments on the rules, you can see them easily, in the meetings, the work group meetings, you're going to see them in there. You're going to see all what we're, working on for the input. So it's a transparent process. It's just that you don't want to have to do everything that's in it. And you don't really want to have to come to every meeting that we have internally or every, look at every complaint that comes in. It's just too much. So, we try to condense that, and we have some really sharp guys in compliance who know what they're doing. They've been in the industry, and they've been really great about, passing along to me the problems come up. And I know that a lot of them are because of the rules. And so, we definitely are in the rulemaking process. And that is, definitely going to be that's going to be the focus of the work groups, is to get that draft ready to go to proposal. So that's the next thing basically on this chart. It says review by the governor's office. When the work groups have finished with the draft and we've finished getting the language nailed down that we think is going to be good to propose, we have to send it to the governor's office for them to look at it and see if they have any issues with it. And they will tell us, and then we may or may not make any adjustments in the draft. Sometimes they have just minor technical things or even a stylistic thing. Other times they're like, we're not real crazy about this. Why don't you rethink that? So, their review may or may not result in changes. Most of the time, they don't want to change things because by the time we send it to them, we're pretty sure, what we want to do and that we can do it. We have to have statutory authority mainly, but we have a lot of rulemaking authority, which we have to have in order to implement the law because the law can't cover every single thing. The rules need to. So it goes to the governor's office. They give us their input, and then that's when it'll go after we make any changes from that. That's when it goes to that first board meeting, and that is where the recommendation whether to propose or not is made. And if the discussion there encompasses all what the work groups have done, which each work group will have a report, and usually at that board meeting before the discussion, the work groups will give those reports on what that work group has been working on and what their recommendations are as far as what's in the rules. But the whole board will see the draft. Everyone on the board's going to see everything that everybody was doing in the work groups when they see that draft. And that's when the board needs to make a decision whether to recommend proposal or to change anything before it's proposed. Very often the board does want to change some language, and that's great because that's when you have to do it. The next step on there is proposing the rule. So once it's proposed, you're pretty locked into what's in there. You can't change a lot after that because it's just like this meeting. You get public notice of rules, and when they're published in the Texas Register, that's the notice that here's what we're going to adopt, barring any minor changes, but there can't be major changes after that because there hasn't been any public notice or input. So we'd have to start over if, we wanted to make a huge change after proposal. So that's the time to make the changes is in the work groups and the meetings of the board before the proposal, because then you're locked in. You might as well assume you're locked in. There might be, minor tweaks, or maybe there's something in there that, after we get all this public comment, we're like, oh, let's just pull it and we'll work on it for the next rulemaking. If we can do that, that's something we could do. But mostly what's proposed is going to be what's adopted with just minor changes because we can't make large ones. So, that's why all this work before the draft is finalized is so important. It's to get it all worded the way we want it. And it's not just worded the way the industry wants it, but we have to regulate. And so part of regulating is having rules that we can enforce that make sense to us as well as the community. And, I see an overwhelming theme of people being really unhappy that the rules don't level the playing field, that people are getting away with things that they shouldn't be. They're not following the rules. Obviously there are problems. And so this draft is trying to address some of that. And, we've had plenty of ideas about where the sore spots are and where the people are complaining about, hey, these guys are getting away with all kinds of things and I'm following the rules, it's not fair. And I agree, it isn't fair. But the rules have to be fair to everyone. So, you have to be able to do your job without us standing over your shoulder all the time. But we have to have confidence that you're going to do your job, but that we don't have to stand over your shoulder and that everybody's, operating under the same rules and has to play fair and doesn't feel like other guys are getting away with stuff. If you feel like that, you're actually obligated by the ethics section to report that. And, that's fine with us. Make a complaint. You can make an anonymous complaint if you want to. It kind of hampers us with enforcement. But, if you see people doing things that aren't complying with how the rules go, that you can complain anytime you like. So anyway, that goes into the mix of the rulemaking. The rule is way overdue to be done, and I agree. We have, a set of things we're going to tackle in this first rule that I've already been drafting, and the work groups have been working on this for a while. So I took a draft that came from the work from before and added to it, and we're still working on that and making a list of all the issues. Some of those things we're going to be able to address in this first rulemaking because they're not as controversial or they're not as huge of a burden. There are other things that we have a list, and I'm sure you all, when you see them, you're going to recognize them. But they're things that are going to take more work grouping and time to kind of sort out. And so our idea is that this first rulemaking is going to be tackling all that we can, that we feel like we can get through this time without a lot of problems or resistance, and then work on those bigger issues for the second rulemaking. And this first one is a reorganization as well. I didn't do the reorganizing, but I've been kind of tinkering with that a little bit, but it is a reorganization of the rules in addition to a lot of changes. So once that's done, it'll be a lot easier to do that second rulemaking to build on this first one being done, because the rules will change. They'll look like the new draft, and then we can, tinker with that, with all the other issues that are still, needing to be resolved. So when the work groups start meeting, we're going to work on getting this first rule done, getting it to the proposal stage. And then, subsequent work groups will be working on those issues for the second rulemaking. And that doesn't have to wait, we can start on that as we go, anytime. So, and once the rule is proposed, then, I think you're familiar with this, it gets published. There's a 30-day comment period. Anyone can comment, y'all can comment, the public comments. We collect all of that, and then we have the second board meeting to, address those comments. Some of them are going to result in maybe some minor tweaks in wording, or, like I said, if we have to pull something, we can pull it probably. But if there are any drastic changes that need to be made, then, the process might have to start with more notice, revise the draft, put out notice, and kind of start over again with the public notice part of it, because we cannot adopt something that the public hasn't had notice of and hasn't been able to comment on. So that's why I'm saying, we're really locked in when we propose the rules. We cannot make huge changes after that because the public won't have notice of that. So then, when the board approves the revision, if any, and also the responses to the comments, because when the rule goes to adoption, you've probably seen it before. In the preamble, we address the comments. So we'll lay out what somebody said, and then we'll put our response there. And that's one of the things that the board, will discuss in that meeting is if you agree with the response that we've written, because usually we know what you think, what you're going to think about the comment, because it's probably something we've already talked about. So we'll draft up some responses, but you're perfectly welcome to change it or say, no, that's not quite what we want to say. We work on that. Then when the rule is adopted, then it's published again, and all of those responses, the comments and the responses are laid out in that preamble. So all of this, like I say, it's going to go through work groups. It's going to go to the board. Nothing's going to get adopted. Nothing's going to get proposed or adopted that everyone on the board isn't aware of and knows and it agrees with that it's going in there. You may not be happy about some of the things we want to put in there because we want to be able to enforce things, but it's give and take, and we look at the realities of things, and we don't want to pass things that are just going to be too much of a burden or just really inconvenient, or we can't pass anything that we don't have statutory or rulemaking authority to do. So by the time the rules go to proposal, you're pretty much going to be happy with what's in there, even if it doesn't get everything done you want done right then. So that's going to be basically this first rulemaking, is we're going to get as much done as we can that we feel like, it'll get through, get it reorganized, and then we'll have a nice, clean slate to start with the second changes, which we can start working on. I mean, we'll kind of start working on them right away in a sense, because we're going to be deciding which ones to wait for that second rulemaking. So then, when the rules are, when the board agrees that we should adopt, then the recommendation is made in that meeting, and then it goes to the commission, and they look at everything. They look at all the documents associated with the the draft and the notice, and what's been happening. they look at all of that and then they recommend adoption or not. And, you know, it's been known to happen that by the time it got to the commission, there was something that they took issue with. But most of the time, if the board has, you know, recommended adoption, the commission is not going to find anything that they're going to object to, because, you know, they know they're not experts in every field, and that, you know, the rule has gone through quite a bit of process to get to that point. So it's not like, you know, it just was off the cuff material. It's been well thought out. So once the board sends it to the commission recommends adoption, then it's published and it becomes effective, you know, a few weeks later. But you know, at that point, it's done. There's not going to be any more change. It's going to be published. The rules are going to be, you know, official. You'll be able to go print them off the website, you know, and you'll see all the new changes. And then, like in this case, we're going to be starting right back up at the left with our list of things that we're going to do on the second rulemaking, and we'll start that. You know, and it doesn't have to be right on the heels of this one. You know, we can start working on those things even while this one's going through the process. It's just that while it's going through the process, you'll be involved with, you know, some of this issues of, you know, the comments that come in and, you know, just the procedures. We went over the Administrative Procedure Act, and, you know, we kind of give you the highlights, but there's a lot to that we have to do. It's not that you have to do, but we have to do as an agency in process to get a rule done. And, you know, there's a lot of considerations, the timing, you know, there's certain amounts of time. Like once the rules are proposed, right there, kind of in the middle where it says proposed in the Texas Register, we have 6 months to get them adopted from that point. If we don't get them adopted, we have to start over. We have to give notice and start the rule over. So we have 6 months from that point. We have, there's really not a deadline pressure until we get into where there are deadlines, and that is pretty much going to be when we send them to the governor's office and have that first board meeting. That's usually going to follow pretty closely. After that first board meeting, if you know, the board does not recommend adoption or proposal because they want to do more changes, we can still, you know, slow it down and go work on them some more and make more changes if we want to. But we, you know, we get into timelines after that first meeting where the recommendation is actually made about, you know, let's, you know, propose these, because then we go to the 30-day comment period. And of course, that's 30 days. And then we have a certain amount of time to answer the comments, prepare the preamble, prepare all the documents that we need to prepare to publish. You know, deadlines really start kicking in then. So right now we're in the stage where we don't have any particular deadlines other than the urgency that everybody wants to get this rule done. But then deadlines are going to kick in later on. So, but you know, really they kick in after, you know, the main decisions are made on what's going to be in that rule. So, you know, right now is the time to take your time if you're going to take it to get them right, to get them the way you want them. And, so we can go to proposal with something that's going to, you know, that's going to not have to change much. So, let's see. Oh, and I wanted to mention the newsletters. I'm in the general counsel's office, and I'm involved in writing the rules and, you know, collecting all of this input and trying to turn that into rules that are going to make sense. And of course, you know, the board and the work groups are all part of that. But primarily I have to write the rules. I don't write the newsletters, but everything that the agency does is kind of a collaborative effort. Some of us have more involvement in things than others. I think a huge issue of its own, but I agree there hasn't been consistency on that issue, but there's never been consistency on it from the time the law was written and the MOLD program started in 2003, because the statute is vague. And so we'll get into that. So I think if you don't have any questions right now about the rulemaking process, we'll get into the discussion of the 25 square foot rule and the mycotoxins definition. And then the following that, there's an item for the work groups, and that's when you can decide, which ones you need to meet, want to meet, and what things you're going to work on in those. Because there are, 4 kinds of work groups, and not each one is going to tackle the same things. And in order to help prevent the walking quorum issues, we really don't want a lot of overlap from the work groups to the other ones, so that we don't have that issue. So we want to have, a certain set of issues to address in the E&E work group, in the enforcement, in the standard of care, in the licensing. As much as we can divide and conquer, we should, because it's better to kind of work on each piece separately in the work groups. And then when we have the board meeting, everybody gets together and they see what the draft looks like, the whole draft, and all the issues can be brought out and everyone can discuss it. And if more work groups need to meet, fine. There's no limit on how often you meet and how many times. So that's kind of like what I'm looking at as far as procedure here, is that, I'll talk about these 2 issues. You'll be assigning work groups. Alex will, be polling everyone for, when you all can meet. And then in those first work groups, each work group that meets will see the parts of the rules that are most relevant to that work group. And we'll start there. And then as we go along, the work groups are gonna, get things done or they're not. And, we'll have to judge by that. I can't really predict how fast this can go, but that's part of the reason I'm trying to get the draft as far along as I can, so that you all have something to look at instead of having to come up with things off the top of your head. If you see something, it's a lot easier to say, oh, well, that's horrible, let's fix that. Or, oh, that looks good, I hadn't thought of that, but you've got it in there, I like that. That kind of thing. So you'll be seeing that in the work group. So don't worry about it if we don't talk about it today. You'll be able to talk about this all very freely in the work groups. They are not recorded. They are not public. They're only those members, and they really need to stay only those members. And then, it's all going to come together. Nobody's going to be left out of anything. You'll be quite aware of what's happening. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, but that's only to make it a little easier on you guys, because, you have your own lives to live, and this is our life. But so, if anyone has any questions about the process, I'll take those now, or, if you have them later, fine. Otherwise, I'll just get right into the next issue about the exemption. So if you have any questions about what I've been talking about so far, let me know now if you want, or later.
Yeah, Laura, I'd really like to get into our next discussion item on the agenda. So the discussion for the board members let's start with number 1, the interpretation of the 25 contiguous square foot rule.
Okay. I'm going to start with what the statute says, because that's always our starting point, is what we have authority to do and what we're told to do in the statute. And that exemption has been in there from the beginning. And in the section on exemptions, there's different ones in there, but the 25 square foot one is it's its own exemption, but it's also kind of tied in with the other ones. And what I'm saying is, it says, if you're an owner, I'm going to say owner, but in the statute, if you've read it, it says the owner or the owner's agent or the, employee. It all kind of means the owner, the person who owns that property is eligible for this exemption, even if it's his agent that's managing the apartment complex or whoever it is, if it's the owner, not a third party mold remediator or assessor. So 1958 102 is where the exemptions are. And it starts out and it says an owner or a tenant or a managing or employee is not required to be licensed to perform mold assessment or mold remediation on property owned or leased by the owner or tenant. Okay, so that's saying you don't need a license to do assessment or remediation on your own property. And right in that, at that point, it's not saying 25 square feet or anything. It's not saying anything about how much mold there is. In 1958, 102, this is the A, and then 2 says if the mold this exemption does not apply if the mold remediation is performed in an area in which the mold contamination affects the total surface area of 25 contiguous square feet or more, or to a person who is exempt under Section E. Okay, so there's where your limit comes in, is that you can do it yourself, but if it's more than 25 contiguous square feet, you're not going to be able to do it yourself necessarily. So where it says, you know, an owner or a managing agent, et cetera, can do it on their own property, that's any kind of property. That doesn't limit it to commercial or your home or anything. It's like any property. In 2, it says if it's performed in an area 25 contiguous square feet or more, then, you know, that exemption doesn't apply. So it's basically saying, yeah, if you have mold, okay, you can do it yourself, but it's only going to be that small area unless you are a owner of a property that's a residential property that's less than 10 dwelling units. So this is giving a pass to people who have a small apartment complex or a duplex or a fourplex, and they have, you know, mold in there. It's saying, okay, if you own it and it's that small of a residential property, you can do it yourself, and you're not limited by the 25 square feet. You can do any amount you want to do.
Laura?
If it's that, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you able to pull this up
Oh,
on the
do you
screen?
want the statute on there? Yeah, I
Yes.
can, let's see. I'll need to stop sharing the procedure, but you know, that's really not as relevant now. So
Yeah,
let's see.
Thank you for that, Laura. This is
Okay,
Steve Bruno, Deputy ED. Thank you for that. That'd be great, so we can all
yeah,
follow along as well.
okay.
Thank you.
Let me find a, um,
Or if it's easier, you can, if you can send it to me, I can pull it up and then
yeah,
share it.
I have it. I just need to pull it up and get to that spot in it. So let me get that. I really wasn't gonna go deeply into exactly the wording in the statute, but it is, you know, it's obviously relevant. So, we'll just look at that part. Um,
Also might want to have what the legislation passed, that ready too, to pop up.
okay, yeah. Um, yeah, that, let's see. Yeah, I'll pull that up when we're talking about mycotoxins, since that's in the bill. Let's see. Okay. Okay, here's the statute, and I'm going to go down to that part about the. I will say, this part here is relevant to sort of like exemptions. This is the part where it says this chapter just doesn't apply to these certain activities. That means you can do them and you don't have to worry about the mold world because they're just not within the scope of mold, is what this is saying. And it's given those examples. And this, of course, is where the demolition exemption is added at number 5, that demolition of a structure after a fire or other disaster is just outside of the scope of the mold rules. You don't have to worry about a assessment or, you know, a protocol or a work plan or anything. If there's been a disaster and you just want to knock the building down, go right ahead. It's not, you know, you're not going to have to abide by anything in mold. But that's a very
Laura,
specific,
this
you
is,
know.
Blake Howard, and I had a question on what does disaster mean in that regard. You kind of were going over it
Yeah,
quickly there. It says fire or disaster. Is a
yeah, and
disaster an insurance claim? Is a disaster have to be declared by FEMA?
right.
What does that mean? Because disaster is very subjective.
Yeah,
most people would only file a claim in a disaster situation on their home for a water leak from a
Yeah.
supply line, right? So like what is that? And maybe this is the wrong time for it, but since you were mentioning it, I
Mhm.
thought we might want to flesh that out as on the
Yeah,
mold
Blake,
to,
this is Chris Jeter. That definitely needs to be a topic to be discussed. That's not on our agenda yet.
Right.
But I'm just like you, super excited to understand that. But if we could hurry up and get through our interpretation, I don't want to say hurry up, but get to the interpretation of 25 contiguous square foot rule so that we can move on to the next topic. Otherwise, we're going to be meeting here till about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, yeah, it's not on the agenda to talk about the bill, but that is definitely something that's going to be covered in the work groups, and we have draft language ready, and so it's, we don't have to recreate the wheel here. You'll be able to see what we've drafted so far, and how that goes over. That'll be in the work group because, like I said, we don't have an item. We are talking about the 25 square foot exemption, so I just wanted to briefly mention this scope of authority section. They're not really exemptions because it's like an exemption is, oh yeah, the mold law applies, except you can do this and not follow it. This is saying the mold law doesn't even apply to these things. It's not, if you do anything in this, very specific set of things, and it's not for the purpose of mold remediation, for most of these, that's how it is. And then even if it is for knocking down a building because it's full of mold, if it's a disaster and you do it, then it's outside of the mold world. So they're not exemptions. They're just, the mold law doesn't apply to those things. So then we go down to the exemptions, and that's where, of course, we get all this tricky language. So like I was saying, the first part, you can be an owner, basically, and do it yourself on your own property. And it's not saying, what amount of mold, it's not saying what kind of property, it's just saying you can do it yourself if it's the 25 contiguous square feet or less. So then, it doesn't apply if, if you're a mold licensee, and you'll see that all over the place. That was put in there in the beginning because there was a lot of fraud going on about, well, the assessor or the remediator would kind of, make a wink, wink, nod, nod agreement to look like the owner so they could take advantage of the exemptions. And so that's why that was put in there by the legislature so that, licensees can't go, make it look like they're the owner and get the exemptions. So I'm not going to deal with that part where it says that. I'm going to talk about the exemption itself. So the first one says, okay, go ahead, do it yourself. Then in number 2, it says if it's, 25 contiguous square feet or more, no, you don't get the exemption anymore unless, like in D or E, you have the less than 10 dwelling units and it's a residential property. So yeah, if you meet that criteria, you're the owner, it's less than 10 units and it's residential and you own it, you can remediate any kind of mold in there, any amount, and you don't need to do an assessment. You don't need to do a remediation. That's why it's exempt. It says it's exempt, so you don't need a licensee. You can do it yourself. Once you hire a licensee, the exemption isn't going to apply to you anymore because, of the, how it says you have to be the owner, but also it has this where you're, if you're in a licensee, you can't do it. Well, you can do it if it's not exempt, and it's not going to be exempt if it's over 10 dwelling units, or it's, not, you're not the owner, you're hiring someone. If there's a third party coming in to do it, then you need the assessment and the remediation, and it's all going to be done under the rules, and you're going to get a certificate and all of that. Okay. So, then, so that's the, A is saying, you can do a small amount unless you meet E, you're that residential owner with less than 10 units. Then you go back up to, and that's all in, that 1, 2, 3 there under, A. If you're, if you're doing, less than 25 contiguous square feet, you get the exemption if you're the owner. If you get it if you're the owner and it's a larger residential property, you get it regardless, no matter what kind of property it is, if you're the owner and it's less than 25 contiguous square feet. And that is what C is saying, that you don't have to be licensed to do a remediation where it's less than 25 contiguous square feet. Well, that's nice, but it's not saying what happens if you are licensed. Can you do that if you're licensed? It says you don't have to have a license, but if you do have a license, can you do that, small area, that small job? And if you'll notice, this particular provision doesn't have that part about if you're if you, work in the business that you're not, this exemption doesn't apply to you. Doesn't say that in this exemption. So this has always said that. This is the way it's always been worded. This is the statute. In 2003, it started out this way, and it's never been clarified. This is why you keep seeing the interpretation going back and forth, because we don't know whether they meant that licensed people could do these jobs. And it's an exemption for that project, but it's not an exemption for a licensee not to follow the rules. So if you tell a person that you don't have to have a license to do this, well, you would think, well, naturally, even if you have a license, you ought to be able to do it. But that's not what it says. And so it's interpretation. We have a lot of rulemaking authority in the rules to, interpret this the way we want to interpret it. Well, unfortunately for the industry, the interpretation has changed, because I know from a DSHS, they took the very strict interpretation that no, if you were licensed, you couldn't do these jobs and you had to do them under the rules, and you just couldn't do them. Well, they softened up on that because it isn't fair to the licensees who can't take these small jobs. Personally, I would think that if you had a licensee doing it, even if they're not doing it under the rules, you're going to get a better job than someone who isn't licensed and doesn't really, may not know what they're doing. So they eased up on it, and then the program transferred to TDLR. And during this time, I was, and then I wasn't the mold attorney, and then I was, and then I wasn't. So I kind of came in and out, and this didn't come up a lot, and so it we didn't have a lot of debates about how do we interpret this, because it just wasn't coming up. And and then the newsletter came out and kind of went back to the strict interpretation, but it's not something that I have the last word on. And so I'm trying to convey that this is a problem with the statute not being clear. It's a problem with making rules that align with what it says and what we think it means. And so you can see why it's kind of going back and forth. We've been wrestling with that. And I really feel like this is something that, we're going to be talking about it in the work groups, because, we
So
can
Laura,
yeah.
sorry, this is Chris Jeter again.
Mhm.
What discussions or decisions do we need to make about the interpretation of the 25 contiguous square foot rule right now?
That is going to be, it's not my decision alone, like I was saying. And so our licensing and enforcement aren't really involved in as much in this as my section, general counsel, and compliance. It's going to be a decision by compliance, the board, and general counsel as to where we're going to go with this.
Because
what
I
rules
can
we're
tell
going to
you
change,
right now that every one of our board members is going to have an opinion on this. And
Right.
do you need to hear these from each of us?
Yeah, we'll hear them in the work group, because we're definitely going to have this in one of the items in the work group.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have this on the agenda for
Yeah.
now. So what do you need to hear from us as far as moving forward?
If I were in your position, I would assign the subject to the work group, and our compliance people need to be there, and I need to be there, and we need to make the decision. I don't feel like it's really necessary to make the decision on the spot today, because whatever is decided, it's going to go into the rules. The rules are going to be more clear one way or the other on this. And so it's going to go into the draft, and it's going to go through the rulemaking process. So we don't need a decision today, but it's going to be an agency decision, not just my decision. I illuminate what the law says and, what we can do by rule, but it's gonna have to be a decision. And this decision may be to just take some baby steps on this and put it into the strategic planning process and try to get, this noticed to fix it with the legislation, because you can see from what I just showed you, it really is not clear, what they intended.
Laura, Mr. President, Marion Armstrong, I see this as coming under at least two of the work groups. Standard of care, one, if more information is going to need to be put into a draft for consideration, and then obviously enforcement. But I don't think individuals may have understood what that newsletter actually states. It basically says every project is regulated based on the information in the newsletter and how it's interpreted. And I don't think that was the intent,
Mhm.
but that is exactly what it says.
Yeah, I agree. There's been confusion about this all along, and I feel like, yeah, we really need to get it settled once and for all. And it's true that a 25 square foot or less job, the client may want it done under the rules. They may want a certificate, and if they want a certificate, you're not using that exemption, or you're not going to get a certificate. There's going to have to be an assessment and a protocol and a work plan. If they want that certificate, that has to be done that way. So not everyone's going to take advantage of the exemption. If you have a apartment complex and you're thinking about selling it, you may not want to do it yourself. You may want to hire licensees and not use that exemption. They're options.
Again, Miss Laura, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. This is Marion Armstrong again. The CMDR has a section specifically for non-regulated remediation projects. It's Bot C, that an assessment consultant can come in, perform an assessment, following the regulations, of course, and then advise their client. The client can take care of it. The owner of the property can take care of it based on the regulations. And then that assessment consultant can come back and do a closing report and issue a CMDR. So they can get that certificate without having a full-blown regulated remediation, if it
Well,
meets the rest of the requirements.
Well, I would disagree on that, because you cannot give a certificate unless there was a protocol and a work plan, and the work plan took care of the mold the way the protocol said it should be done. And so, yeah, you can sign the bottom of a certificate, but that signing it at the bottom is not saying anything about, oh, well, we did a protocol, somebody did a protocol, and the remediation looks great, and let me sign it. No, it's not. It doesn't say that. It says right then, it's a snapshot in time of what that project looks like, whether there was a project or not. I mean, there may not have been mold, there may not have been a remediation. A person just wants something that says there's no mold here. Because like maybe there was a hurricane and flooding, and they're like, oh, I better have something. So an assessment, person could come in there and sign the bottom of that certificate, whether or not there was mold, whether or not there was a remediation. All it's saying is there's no mold there now. If you want a certificate, if you want the CMDR that says, yeah, there was mold, it was remediated, and it was remediated according to the protocol and the work plan, then you can get the top of the certificate. There's no mold remediator that can sign the top, or assessment, a MAC or a company. No one can sign that unless the job was done under the rules. And if the job's done under the rules, there's a protocol, there's a work plan, and all of that. You don't have to take advantage of the exemptions. If you are a homeowner and you get, a professional out there to assess it, and the MAC says, oh, this is just a little job, you could do it yourself. You don't really have to, go get one of us to clean it up and all of that. Fine, they can take advantage of the exemption, but they're not going to get a certificate if they do it themselves, because they're under an exemption. It's not under the rules. So I would disagree that, you can sign the top of a certificate if there's been a do-it-yourself remediation. That doesn't fly. No, you can't. That is pretty clear in the rules, at least to me it is, that, yeah, you can take advantage of these exemptions, but you're not gonna get the top of that certificate signed. You're gonna get the bottom if you get anything, you know, if you hire somebody to do that. You know, you, as a MAC, you can sign that, but when you're signing the bottom, you're not signing that there was a remediation, that it was done under the rules or not, or that even that there was a remediation. All you're saying is, I'm an assessment professional and I don't see any mold here, and sign your name, you know? So, but these are the kinds of things that, you know, we can talk about in the work group and kind of try to get everyone on the same page, and not only what the policy is, but what the rules are going to say. And I quite agree. The rules do not cover this well enough to address what the statute says. And, you know, for whatever reason, they never have, you know, the rule has not been changed, except at DSHS, it kind of opened it up and it said, if you're a licensee, you can take you know, the small jobs, the less than 25 contiguous square feet, but you're still obligated, because you're a licensee, you cannot just say, oh, well, I'm tossing the rules out the window because this is an exempt job. No, you can't, you're not exempt from the rules. You know, you're not exempt from the rules, you know, following them as a person. That job may be exempt, but the rules still apply to you as far as, yeah, you have to go by the ethics code, and you know, you can't just, you know, rip people off and do things outside of the rules that you know are wrong. You may not have to do a work plan, you may not have to do a protocol, whatever it is that's exempted, but you are still a licensee. You can't just, you know, toss aside the rules because you are subject to them as a licensee, even if you're
Gary
doing an
Stanford
exempt
here. I'd
job.
like to make a comment, if I may.
Mhm.
We're chewing up a lot of time here, but as
Yeah.
a member of the 2003, 2004 Department of Health Mold Task Force, the original intent was not to exclude contractors, qualified contractors,
Mhm.
from doing small jobs.
Right.
It later came out, several years later, that in doing so, these licensed mold remediation contractors would have to follow all the rules, regardless of the scope and size of the job,
Right.
which basically eliminated them from doing the work that they were very qualified to do, and
Right.
left it to Chuck in a truck, who was not particularly well qualified to do any kind of mold remediation, large job or small job. So the interpretation came out later, that the mold remediation contractor had to follow all the rules. And the original intent of the 25 contiguous square feet was visible mold on a surface in close proximity or touching. Had nothing to do with the size of the containment or anything else, but what you could see on a wall or surface that was 25 contiguous square feet. So that's a little history on the
Right.
background, since most of us weren't around in 2003, 2004 doing this.
Yeah, and the rules, you know, they've changed over time, certainly. The statute hasn't changed a lot, but the rules have. And, you know, if you look in the statute, visible isn't even in there. That word is not even in the statute. That was in the rules. And we are backing away from that because I agree, it isn't a good standard for remediation to only deal with visible mold, you know. And so there are aspects of that, though. You know, there may be mold that you can't see unless you tear a wall out, and then you see a whole lot of it. But you know, those are the kind of things we work out in the work group as to how we can write a rule that's going to cover those kinds of things. And so, like I'm saying, you know, we don't have to answer this today, and we really can't answer this today unless we get all on the same page. And the way we do that is take it to the work group, you know, decide how we're going to go forward with this. Are we going to try to, you know, solve it or send it to strat planning? You know, what are we going to do? Because I know, I agree, it needs to be sorted out. There's probably not any other issue that's quite as controversial as this one. And part of the problem is what you're looking at right in front of you, the statute. It's not clear. It's, you know, an unlicensed person can do it, but nothing about if you're licensed, nothing about, you know, if you're a licensee, you know, this exemption doesn't apply to you, not in there. So,
And
so
again,
I'm, you know,
Stanford, again, I would ask again why the mold advisory board was not involved in making this interpretation. That's what we're here for, I thought, as I read our purpose. First
Well,
time I heard about it was through word of mouth, and then it came through the newsletter.
yeah, well, the advisory board is, your main role is advising us on rules. As far as newsletters, that, they're not rules, obviously, but yeah, we want them to be consistent with the rules. But the rules and the statute are not consistent with what's happening in real life, what people are, not happy about. And so I can see where the disconnect came in, because I think you all understand how tricky the mold law is. And so, I'm sorry, it is not quite the way the rules are written, and it's obviously not quite the way the statute's written, because there isn't a whole lot in the statute, but we need to resolve it. I'm sorry about the confusion, and I'm really wanting to sort it out, and we really do need to do the work groups to do that, to get your frank opinions about all of this, so that we can sort it out and have, a final position on this and not have to keep toying with it. We can move on to the mycotoxins, and when it comes time to do work groups, this can certainly be one of the things that's assigned. You don't have to, name every single issue, but when this one's assigned, it can include the 25 square foot exemption plus the other issues that we're working on for rulemaking that have to do with, standard of care and of course licensing and, the various work groups. We almost, nearly always, there's someone from the different sections of the agency that needs to be there. Like for the standard of care, we're obviously going to have people from compliance in there. But we might just have someone from licensing too, but really, it doesn't become a licensing issue or an enforcement issue until we sort out what the outcome's going to be. So, that's kind of bringing in parts that aren't really going to be able to do anything about it until there's a decision on what the policy and the rule is going to be. So, enforcement can't enforce something and they don't know what it's going to be that they're enforcing. So I feel like, in the rulemaking, this is one thing we're going to sort out. And hopefully, maybe for the first rulemaking, maybe not till the second, but that's something that, we'll talk about. And so, like I say, I would recommend, this is an assignment to the work group. And we'll have compliance in there. I'll be in there, we'll get it sorted out. So I'll put SB 1255 on there, if we want to just move on.
Yes, please do that, Laura.
Okay. Did you all want to take a break or something before we go further? I mean,
I think we're close to the end. If no one has any objections, I'd like to keep going.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to have the discussion of work groups and possible creation of new work groups. So as of right now, I'm showing we have 4 work groups: education and examination work group, licensing work group, the enforcement work group, and the standard of care work group. So we really don't have a compliance work group. If we were going to put it somewhere, I think the standard of care and the compliance might fall more hand in hand. Does anyone have any objections to that? Or would you prefer us just make a new work group?
You may
I'm
need
in
to
agreement.
assign some members as well. I'm not sure that the membership is up to date.
This is Antonio. I agree with you that compliance probably falls a little bit more under that standard of care work group. I mean, it could fall a little bit under enforcement, but I think it's really going to be more with the compliance. I mean, more with the standard of care, and then can always get enforcement involved if need be.
I know we talked about the standard of care. I think there was a lot more people wanting to be on that one, and we initially talked about having two groups. So, you know, if we wanted to make compliance separate, this would be a way to do that without having two work groups trying to discuss and hash out the same thing. So,
Mr. Jeter, I have that pulled up if you want me to share it.
oh yeah, please do. Makes it a little bit easier for me.
Mr. Jeter, pardon me, I think we did talk at one point about splitting standard of care, pardon me, between assessment and remediation. And each one of those could have the compliance aspect of it within that standard of work group, standard of care work group.
It's actually a pretty good idea. Let's see here. Any other comments or recommendations?
Gary Stanford here. Would you want a motion to that effect? Or is that required?
Yeah, let's I like Marion's idea of having that two groups. One geared more for assessment and one geared more for remediation. I
I'll
think that'd
motion
be a really
to
good direction
create.
to go.
Yeah, this is Antonio. I'll motion to create two standard of care work groups, one more for remediation, one for the assessments.
I'll second that.
And that was two standard of care work groups, one for remediation. And the other was for what?
The
The
assessment.
assessors.
Assessors. Okay. And then Mr. Jeter, what did you second?
I did.
Okay. Okay. Board
And
members? Oh, go ahead.
I believe that motion should have an compliance aspect included in that standard of care.
Standard of care and compliance work group.
Right.
Oh, this is Laura Pefferly, General Counsel's Office. Are we, do you want to have different membership on these? Because I would think you do, and you can assign the members, get volunteers or assignments now for the two different work groups.
Yes, that is correct. And we have as of right now, so the standard of care work group that is there. I see we got a lot of consultants on there. So are y'all okay with making the existing one the consultants, the assessors, I should say?
Yes, that's certainly feasible. I don't know if Mr. Gam is still in the meeting, but I do know that he wanted to remain on the standard of care assessment work group.
Okay. Miss, we still have a motion and a second on the floor. We can go ahead and vote on the creation and then fill it after.
Gotcha.
Okay. So board members, this is a motion with a second to create two standard of care work groups, one focusing on remediation, the other as assessors. And this is within the compliance realm, is that correct?
It's standard
It'll
of
be
care
standard of care and compliance.
work
And-
group.
Oh, and compliance. Okay. All right. Gary Stanford,
Yes.
Antonio Pena,
Yes.
Mary Armstrong,
Yes.
Victor Ochoa,
In favor.
Blake Howard,
Yes.
Bruce Okrulik,
Yes.
Brad Gam. Oh, did he drop off? Okay. Luis Acuna
Yes.
and presiding officer Chris Jeter.
Yes.
Yes, sir. The motion passes.
Excellent. All right. So we have those two groups, standard of care and compliance work group for remediation contractors and one for assessors. Did we agree that the existing one would be the assessors? Do we have to vote on that, Alex, or can we just make that be?
You mean on the list? We can just go ahead and change that.
Okay. And yeah, so that leaves us 5 new openings for the remediators side. Do we have any volunteers?
This is Antonio. I can volunteer on the remediator side, unless somebody on the assessor side wants to jump over, because with me being more of a assessment consultant, but I'm good with joining up with the remediator side.
Yeah.
Blake Howard will join the group. I'm a MRC.
I'll also join that group.
This is Bruce Okrulik. I'll join that group.
How many more spots do we have, Alex? Do we have one more?
Is it appropriate to have the same person on both groups for consistency, or is that
I was just
potentially
getting
a
ready
walking
to,
quorum?
Don't forget Antonio on that one.
it shouldn't be a walking quorum as long as we're not, well, I don't know. These are two closely related.
It's two complete sections of the standard and the
Yeah,
rules.
I wouldn't see a problem with being on both.
I would, this is Laura Pepperly, General Counsel's Office. I would not recommend having an overlap of membership if you can avoid it, because
Okay.
it would be really hard to say that's not a walking quorum, you know.
Have Antonio.
Well,
Howard,
we have overlap in all of the others. I'm only on one work group, and I did that intentionally because I knew it was going to be a large work group when we first got together. And so I have some history for the remediation side as well.
You know, typically the work groups are addressing, you know, sort of a discrete set of issues. This one is going to be the exact same issues, just from two different perspectives. That's what I'm recommending. I strongly recommend that you don't have overlap if possible. It's always, you know, it's always a possibility to do away with the two work groups and just have one after, you know, some of the issues are sorted out. You can always change it, you know, and go back to just one work group once the two, you know, these two meet a few times, or one or two, or however many times. I just feel like it would be really hard to, you know, to separate the two, the content of the two work groups, having the same member, you know, on both.
I'd like to move Brad to the remediation one, and we'll open up another spot for the consultants, the assessor side.
Yeah, because I think this is Antonio. I think Mary and Gary and myself are the 3 mold assessment consultants.
I think we have the remediation side full. We'll have just for the sake of moving on, we can always fill in a spot. I don't know if Sherry is still a member or if Kuvion is interested in either. Well, Laura's already on that group, and Sherry Gather is too. Okay.
You don't have to have 5 either. You can work with 4, you don't have to have 5.
We'll start it off there. We'll leave it at 4, and if we get some other interest or someone else wants to come in at a later time, we can address that.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be done in a board meeting. We can do that in between. It's not an official act of the board, so yeah, we can massage the membership in between.
So that being said, I'd like to move on to the recommendations. I'm sorry. The agenda for the next board meeting.
Did
We
you
will
want to
get
not
to
cover did you not want to not cover the mycotoxin issue, or because you don't have to, but it's on the agenda.
Well, your recommendation that we put these in the work groups, was it not? So what are we going to discuss here that, I mean,
Well, the
pretty solid.
mycotoxins is an item on the agenda if you want to cover it. There's not a whole lot really there to cover, in my opinion, but we can touch on it, or you don't have to cover it if you want to just do it in a work group. But
We'll do that briefly just because it's on there.
okay.
I'd like to express my concern or opinion on the mycotoxins issue. Is one, mycotoxins is listed as a poison, and we have the EPA, we have OSHA, we have FDA. These are all the federal groups that for the most part regulate these things, and we have nothing as far as in our industry from a remediation side that has a proven standard yet for identification, for removal. And then, why are we trying to regulate something that we don't have a proven system for yet? Right? There's all kinds of stuff out there. My recommendation is just to have it removed, and that might be something else later on down the road that the state might have to look at it regulating. But as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of hard holding us liable for mycotoxins.
This is Antonio. I'm in agreement with you, Chris, because as far as I'm concerned, mycotoxins are a byproduct of mold itself. So if we have mold, if we have spores, if we have the hyphae, chances are we're going to have mycotoxins. So in my opinion, I'm in agreement with you because mycotoxins are a byproduct and we don't need to include that as well.
I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, I think I'm more scared of mycotoxins than I am mold, but there's no way to track this. There's no proven system. I mean, there are some that are starting to come about, but we don't know how good they are. They haven't been tested. So I'm glad that this went through the legislature and came up, and I hope TDLR adopts it as it is.
Well, this is Laura Pefferly, General Counsel. That definition that they've modified there to take out mycotoxins, that's going to be in the rules modified to take out mycotoxins as well. We have not been directly regulating mycotoxins. The statute is aimed at ensuring that when you do assessment or you do remediation, you do it according to the rules in the statute. It's to, protect public health and, protect consumers from, fraud. But it doesn't target mycotoxins. And I definitely agree that if you remove the mold, you're going to remove the mycotoxins, but we're not specifically targeting mycotoxins. The statute does not target them. It was just trying to define what's considered mold. We're concerned with, are you getting rid of the mold? We're not saying, okay, did you get rid of the spores but not the hyphae? No, we're not doing that. We're just saying you need to remediate it properly. And if you properly remediate it, it's going to take care of spores, hyphae, and mycotoxins all at once. If the state decides to regulate mycotoxins purposely. They could do it in the mold law, but I would think they would do it in another statute, actually. We don't have any rules on this. If you want to say, well, mycotoxins are mold, so all your rules are on it. Well, you could say that, but we don't have anything that targets mycotoxins. We just say mold.
Yeah.
You need
Well,
to get
just
rid of
because it's
mold.
included in the definition, that,
Right.
that's what, anytime a mold lawsuit comes up, there's going to be the inclusion of mycotoxins, and hey, you didn't finish remediating the property properly. And well, 90% of
And yeah,
consultants I know don't have a means of testing for it.
and that goes to the mold remediation. You haven't like removed spores and fungi and everything else and left mycotoxins there. I don't see how
Well,
anyone
we
could
have. I mean,
make
there
it.
is proven evidence of that, and that's where
Okay.
we really want to try and separate this, because removing mycotoxins is a whole separate issue.
Okay. Well, then it needs to be addressed, I think, better than this in the law, because it really, they're not saying go out there and regulate mycotoxins. They're just saying, we need to regulate that you do a mold remediation properly. And, if mycotoxins are still left there, there was arguably an argument for that before, but now with them taking that out specifically not to regulate them, then yeah, we're not going to be writing any rules as far as, I can see that are going to address this in any way. We never did write rules that addressed mycotoxin. So there's really no changes to make other than changing the definition like was done. So.
And now, has that already been adopted by TDLR and the rules?
That's in this draft. It's going to be, but it's changed in the statute. So, the rule is going to tie close the gap there, close the circle. But since it's out of the statute, yeah, there are no rule changes other than changing the definition and the rules to match this. But I'm not aware of any rules that we have that targets mycotoxins. All the time I've been working with them, we haven't. So I don't see any other changes we need to make.
Agreed.
We can bring this up in a work group, but I don't really think there's a whole lot to work group on it unless somebody has a thought about something in the rules that may need to change. But right now, I don't see anything.
Marion, I've never heard your side as far as what you think about mycotoxins and inclusion or removal of it. I know you're a well-respected consultant in the industry, so.
Oh dear, don't throw me under the bus today, sir. I don't disagree with what you had to say, Chris. There, mycotoxins are not visible. You cannot look to see whether you have mycotoxins with an unaided eye. There is not a consensus on an appropriate method for testing them and verifying them. People are doing some fairly wild analytical sampling techniques, and then laboratories analyzing those. There is no consensus on what is an acceptable level of mycotoxins. You can't even do an indoor-outdoor comparison. And I don't think that was the original intent of the mold regulations back in the 2000s, when we started putting this together in order to help the general public and the insureds with their water damage issues. So I'm the definition of mold as it's on the screen right now with the corrections is perfectly delightful.
Awesome. Okay. Do we have any more conversation to happen on mycotoxins from anyone else? All right. All right. So real briefly, we're going to go over the recommendations for the agenda items for our next board meeting. Do we have any suggested recommendations right now?
This is Laura from General Counsel's office, Laura Pefferly. You'll definitely want to have work group reports on there if the work groups meet, and I'm thinking they're going to meet. So, one item would be work group reports.
Completely agree, and I hope we've had a couple of meetings with our work groups before our next board meeting?
Gary Stanford here.
Gary?
I've got several items, and I'm going to reference the Texas Real Estate Commission, TREC, who license home inspectors. Currently, a MAC is required to have a general liability insurance, which absolutely does nothing for the homeowner. As a TREC home inspector, I'm required to have E&O insurance. So I think it is really important that MACs have E&O insurance, and I can afford the $1,500 a year premium that's going to cost to provide the homeowner some real protection, other than saying, yeah, I got insurance.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Gary, and I'd actually like to add one extra part to that. For the contractor side, pollution insurance, because general liability does not cover any mold remediation activities. So Gary's made a great point of adding E&O for the consultant side. I'd also like to add that we discuss having pollution insurance added for the contractor side.
I would suggest that that be a work group assignment because it would help to have some research on this and before it gets to the agenda. I mean, I already feel like it is going to be a work group topic because I have that on my list. There's going to be, like I said, a lot of things we need to cover in the work groups that we don't really need to parse out every single issue. But if you want to have a discussion about the insurance itself on the agenda, that's fine. But probably by the time we get to the next board meeting, that'll have been worked out in a work group and they'll just, we'll have an answer as which way we're going. But, it's fine if you want to leave it on there in case we need to have more debate on it.
All right,
Next
I'll get
on the
that
list
set over. Gary, what you got next?
continuing education. As a TREC home inspector, I'm required to have 32 hours of continuing education every 2 years in the licensing cycle to maintain my certified industrial or environmental CEIE certification, certified indoor environmentalist. I'm required to have 40 hours of continuing education every 2 years. As a MAC, I'm required to have 8 hours of continuing education every 2 years.
2 years.
I have recycled, I'm relicensed, I've gone through 11 licensing cycles, or yeah. So I've taken the 8-hour Mickey Mouse mold refresher course 11 times or 10 times. We're doing as a profession, a great disservice by not having a sufficient amount of continuing education for the licensees. So that would be another item, and I don't know if you have any opinion on that or not.
Well, I think another great topic. Definitely also one of my concerns from the contractor side as well. But I'm probably going to be told that needs to be a work group item as well. Is that correct, Laura?
But yeah, this is Laura Pepperly with the General Counsel's Office. Yeah, these subjects are definitely going to be addressed in the work groups. And, you don't really have to settle on what the agenda is going to be now because, it can always be changed and added to until we actually publish the next agenda. So if you want to, work group these things and then save for the agenda, what really needs to have a full board discussion, you could go that route and just not try to pick out what subjects need to be debated now. Do that after the work groups when, if the work groups can't settle on an issue then, and you really need a board debate, then that would be the kind of things you want to list. And you don't have to nail that down today,
Do we?
Well, I know everybody's ready to get out of here, but a couple more items. Mandating negative air during the demo phase of a remediation. I think this is something that should be determined by the consultant, not mandated by TDLR. And that interpretation came about, I don't know when and where. The mold remediation contractors may have a different perspective on that. But again, I think this is something that the MAC should be saying as part of the protocol or not.
Yeah, I agree. Gary, I know you're probably gonna have a list of items like me. So let's do this. Any of your recommendations, you can shoot those over to Alex or myself, if that's, if I'm good to say that. Do they have my emails? Can they have my email, Laura? Or is that a conflict?
No, you know, that's okay to communicate with the work groups to get things on the agenda.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to have substantive discussions with outside of the work group if you can avoid it, but that's what all work groups are for, is the substantive discussion. And I can guarantee you everything you've talked about is already on the list for the work groups. So I don't think we're going to miss anything. So I don't think you have to worry about that. Like I say, you don't have to narrow down the subjects now if you don't want to.
Well, that's what I was
Um,
getting at. So what we'll
Yeah.
do is we're gonna focus on getting these work groups going and get a
Mhm.
couple of meetings in. As far as a board meeting, I'd like to see it within sometime during the summer, second quarter. So we'll narrow down that date and have a discussion on that. I'll get with Alex to make that happen. But in the meantime, I'm gonna work on getting our, let's see, our standard of care and compliance, both work groups meeting. Does anyone have a recommendation on meetings? I'd like to see it monthly. I don't know if that is good with y'all's schedule or if that's too much. Monthly, every other month.
This is Antonio. I think starting out monthly may be a good idea, and then we can always back it down from there.
I like
We
that.
were
This is gonna
meeting
look-
monthly when we first got together as a work group. So monthly works.
This is Laura Pepperly in General Counsel's office. I know you've made assignments for the two standard of care work groups, but you may want to consider having the education and examination work group meet at least once to talk about the CE and the training, any issues related to, you know, CE training, that sort of thing that falls into that. Oh, and the exam. The exam was another issue that was, you know, of interest. So that would be the perfect subjects for the E&E work group. And you may need to have some overlap between the standard of care work group and the licensing work group. But if the members can, you know, remember to keep that separate, there's probably members on the standard of care work groups that are interested in the E&E issues, but I would say that's probably a good idea to have that as a separate work group, just to, you know, spread the load around if nothing else. So you may want to assign some people to that.
Okay. I have that done. All right. All right. Do we have any more discussions, recommendations before we adjourn?
Mr. Jader, Alex Ortiz, TDLR. I will add that if any of the members were not able to provide topics for the next meeting, feel free to, or even if something else comes up, even tomorrow, you can feel free to email that to me, and I can make sure and put that on the next agenda and have that. As long as, you know, like Laura said, we have from now until we file the agenda for the next meeting to add topics on there.
Thank you, Alex. All right. Well, at this time, I will adjourn the meeting. It is 12:48. Still December, or no, sorry, March 31st. Thank y'all very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.